My immediate family always hosted Christmas when I was younger. At the time, we lived on the upper level of a two-family house. My parents owned the house and rented the bottom floor out to multiple tenants throughout the years. Christmas time of 2012, a new tenant had just moved in downstairs. He was a quiet-seeming 30-something-year-old male, and quiet was the kind of tenant my parents were looking for. Unfortunately, a few days into him moving in downstairs, there would be a lot of noises at all hours of the night. For example, the front door would open and shut numerous times throughout the night, and sometimes there would be loud talking, and some instances yelling. My dad went downstairs one night to see what the commotion was and to ask him to keep the noise down. That was the start of my dad's suspicions about that guy downstairs. Fast forward to Christmas Eve night. We had the whole family over. The dining room table was stretched out with all 20 seats taken. My Uncle Jake is a heavy smoker, so he goes outside to smoke several times throughout the night. After our main course, Uncle Jake went outside for yet another smoke. He mistakenly left his phone on the table, however. When it rang a few times after he went outside, my dad ordered me to go run his phone to him outside. So, I grabbed his flip phone and ran it down the stairs. However, before I went out the front door, I stopped to notice the back door was open. See, when you walk into the house, there's a little hallway with 3 doors, one door which led to the downstairs apartment, the front door, and then a hallway that stretched to the back door. The back door was open, so I figured my uncle went out back. The phone was still ringing, so I hurried to the backyard to find my uncle, but he didn't seem to be back there. Just when I was about to give up, I heard someone in the shed. The shed door was open. I called for my uncle, and someone came out of the shed. It was too dark to see him, but I was pretty sure it was my uncle. He started walking over to me fast. At first, I assumed it was because he wanted to answer his phone in time, but when he got close enough to the lights from inside of the house, I could see his face. It wasn't my uncle, but rather the tenant from downstairs. For some reason, the way he was approaching me, I found intimidating, so I turned and ran for the door. I slammed it in that man's face and went to the front yard, where I found my Uncle Jake smoking. I stood by him and told him about the downstairs tenant and how he seemingly just charged at me. My uncle is the kind of guy to not really take things I say seriously, where he's just not that kind of person to confront someone. I stayed with him until he finished his smoke because I was uncomfortable. Then, we walked back upstairs to the dinner table together, where I told my dad about the tenant in the shed and how he followed me. There was a silence at the table. My dad seemed a little concerned, but I guess he didn't want to ruin the remainder of our Christmas dinner, so he waited until we were done to check outside. When he came back up, he said the neighbor wouldn't answer his door, but that the shed outside was shut. A couple of hours later, the last of our family left, and my immediate family started getting ready for bed. I stayed up in the living room by the fire and tree because I liked the lighting the two gave off. I watched a Christmas movie. I guess I nodded off at some point while watching it. However, I do remember waking up suddenly from a kind of half-sleep and hearing a creaking on the stairs. I was too tired to move from my lying position. Plus, I assumed it was just my mom, dad, or sister. Not to mention, our giant Christmas tree blocked my view of the stairs. We had all carpeted floors upstairs, so I couldn't hear whoever it was roaming around, but I heard a door down the hall open, probably my sister going back to bed. By now, the fire seemed to be almost dead, and the movie I was watching was over. The clock under the TV read 1 o'clock in the morning. I figured I'd just stay on the couch at that point because I was so comfortable. A few minutes later, I heard something rustling by the tree. It sounded like an ornament fell off of it. Someone had definitely walked into it. I flipped on my side and looked at the tree, but it was as still as it always was. Though, I flipped back on my other side, eyes still open, and saw a man standing over me, bending slightly. Of course, initially, my first reaction was to scream. My second reaction was to analyze the face to see if it was my father. When I realized it wasn't my father, rather, the downstairs tenant, I screamed even louder. The man tried to cover my mouth, but at that point, I think he realized it was too late. Everyone heard me. He ran for the stairs just as my dad stormed out of his room. My dad chased after him, but he was already driving down the street. I think, when he was standing over me, he was making sure I was asleep before robbing the place or something. Fortunately for us, my parents had copies of his ID and other important information, which my parents used to find him and sue him for breaking and entering. We won the case in a landslide. Don't let that take away from the fact that it was still an insanely scary thing to go through.